Okay, let's start. Javier Becerra, chairman of the Democratic Caucus. We held a pretty extensive caucus this Friday afternoon, even though Republicans have completed voting for the week. And once again, we do not have a budget in place for our government. But here, Democrats, we're ready to work, and we wish that we weren't once again watching this brinksmanship and this fiscal cliff resurface again. It was a bad B-rated movie when we saw it the last time, and it doesn't look any better as a rerun. Democrats believe that we should be focusing right now, as elected representatives of the people, on strengthening the middle class, helping our economy grow more jobs. Because if we don't have a strong middle class, we may as well turn off the lights. We're not going to create those jobs. We're not going to continue to be the leader in the world if we don't focus like a laser beam on creating middle class jobs and helping grow the middle class so that they can buy that home, they can send their kids to college. For the life of me, I don't think any of us understand how shutting down our government and stopping services to the middle class, to that soldier's family, to that veteran who's come home, to that senior who relies on that Meals on Wheels lunch, how shutting the doors of government is going to help in any way strengthen the middle class. But this is where we see ourselves. We would urge our Republican colleagues to put country before party, to stop with this discussion that what governs in the House of Representatives are party rules. Not the rules of the House of Representatives, not the rules provided to us by our statutes or by our Constitution, but a political rule, a so-called Hastert rule, a rule that's a Republican Party rule that says, don't you dare let anything go on the floor of the House of Representatives unless it has the support of a majority of Republicans. Not the support of a majority of Americans who were elected to serve their country as elected representatives in the House, but a majority of Republicans. If you're going to put party before country, we will end up seeing these folks shut down government. But we urge our colleagues in the House Republican Party to please think of putting country before party. The American people have witnessed enough. No small business in America would run the way the House of Representatives is being run today. And if no small business on Main Street would run this way and expect to survive, then certainly the largest economy in the world should not be run this way. We think it's time to get to work, to strengthen the middle class. We have a lot pending. We still have to deal with making sure that we don't let our country, for the first time in its history, default on its past obligations. To make it clear that we believe in the full faith and credit of the United States of America. We still have to finish fixing a broken immigration system. The Senate already acted. Once again, the House is showing the obstruction and dysfunction that makes it clear that we are not thinking of helping the middle class. And so there are any number of things that we need to do. The last thing we need to do is watch as a very dedicated group of Tea Party members tell America that they are ready to shut down government. We're ready to work. We hope our Republican colleagues are ready to join us. And with that, let me yield to the Vice Chairman of the Democratic Caucus, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Crowley, Joe Crowley.
Thank you. Here we are again, another fiscal cliff. The American people once again put on edge artificially. There's enough calamity, both man-made and naturally, occurring out there in the world today. We've seen it with the flooding in Mexico, the floods in Colorado. We have unrest in the Middle East and Syria. We've had 13 individuals last week killed less than a mile from here. And the response of the Republican Congress isn't to find a solution, let Americans know that everything's okay with their government, that government will go on, Instead, it's to create another artificial crisis. The American people don't want more crises. They certainly don't want artificial crises. They want the Republican Congress to get its act together. That is now the full responsibility of the Speaker, is to get his caucus together and come up with solutions. The American people want solutions to the problems we're facing. No more man-made crises. We are here prepared to work throughout the weekend to ensure that government does not shut down. Our question is, are our Republican colleagues committed to ensuring that government not shut down? That's a question for the Speaker and for his conference. We Democrats stand ready to ensure that government will continue to operate. And with that, I will give you our lead man on the budget, the gentleman from the great state of Maryland, Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you, Joe, Javier, and it's great to have all of you here today. We don't know how long we're going to be here as the Republicans try to figure out what they're going to do next. But one thing we do know is that all signs point to the fact that they're hell-bent on trying to shut down the government in order to implement the Tea Party extreme agenda. We don't yet know what the Speaker intends to do, other than what appears to be the plan to put another amendment on the continuing resolution unrelated to keeping the government operating and focused on trying to dismantle or derail the Affordable Care Act. If that's what they do, that'll be a sure sign, as my colleague said, that they're focused on shutting down the government rather than doing the business of government in trying to do what we can to support the middle class. And it's also troubling to hear that they're going to double down on this strategy in the coming weeks with respect to the so-called debt ceiling, which, as all of you know, simply means that the government should be paying its bills on time. And their position, once again, is they're going to prevent the United States government from paying its bills on time. They're going to jeopardize the full faith and credit of the United States government if they cannot enact their extreme agenda. And so far, we've seen reports that they're essentially taking every Tea Party idea and throwing that into a package and telling the country that if we don't enact that extreme agenda, they're not going to allow the country to pay its bills on time. And as I think everybody in the country realizes, if the government doesn't pay its bills on time, it's the middle class that gets hurt first, as the chairman of our caucus has indicated. That's irresponsible, it's reckless, and we stand ready to work with them to try and resolve this. And that's the last point I want to make, because I think everybody needs to understand that we've been trying to bring our Republican colleagues to the negotiating table on the budget for months and months and months. The statute, the law says that you should have completed a conference committee on the budget by April 15th. House passed a budget, Senate passed a budget, but the Speaker of the House refused to appoint negotiators. And in the Senate, Republican senators blocked Harry Reid from appointing negotiators. Senator McCain said that was insane. Those are his words, that they blocked him, but they did. And so we've been trying to negotiate these issues in the normal course, but what they clearly intended all along was to create these artificial crises, because they somehow thought that if you threaten to shut down the government or threaten that we will no longer pay our bills on time, that under those pressing circumstances that they will get their extreme agenda put into place. And it just doesn't work that way, and that's not going to happen. So,
Chris, thank you very much. We'll take some questions. Yeah, thank you.
Conservatives are asking that they include on the CR defunding or delaying Obamacare and other provisions. If Speaker Boehner were to break with that and were to end up adding something to the CR that was unrelated to Obamacare, could Democrats support that and send it back to the Senate?
And I think all of us would want to say something on this, but we're interested in keeping our government operating and services out there for people who pay for these services. We all pay our taxes. So we expect if we need to go collect our Social Security check if we're retired, doors will be open. If we have paid for our government to be able to issue a passport so we can go visit an ailing or dying parent. We want to be able to do that. And so we should focus our efforts in this budget discussion on issues that relate to the budget. But our colleagues on the Republican side insist on including things that have nothing to do with budget and all to do, as the ranking member on the Budget Committee said, all to do with their Republican extreme social agenda. Would we vote for things that have nothing to do with budget simply so Republicans can be satisfied that if they extort the American people, we'll have a budget? I don't think so. I think the president's made it very clear. We want a clean budget vote that is all the extraneous matters that are social agenda, far-right social agenda issues are off the table, because it's members of Congress will continue to come to work. But if the Republicans shut down the government, then there are a whole lot of Americans who won't get to go to work, and there are a whole lot of other Americans who won't be able to receive the services they paid for. So, clean vote. That's all Democrats are saying. A vote on budget and only on budget. You want to debate your social agenda? We can do that, and we can vote that up or down at a later time. But don't hold hostage the American economy and the American people so you can get your social agenda. It's too important to the middle class and too important during this time of economic recovery to start to weaken the pillars that we're beginning to reestablish so that our middle class gets back on its feet. And so I don't think Democrats are ready to engage in any of this shenanigans that has nothing to do with budget and all to do with an extreme hard-right social agenda. Brevemente, bueno, estamos aquí esperando que los republicanos deciden qué es lo que quieren hacer. Desafortunadamente parece que los republicanos tienen pleito entre ellos y no pueden decidir qué quieren hacer. Esta no es una manera de darle al país el liderazgo que necesita en un momento cuando ya estamos al momento de cerrar las puertas del gobierno, solo porque los republicanos no pueden decidir qué es lo que quieren hacer para avanzar el presupuesto nacional. Desafortunadamente, parece que la facción de los Tea Party en el Partido Republicano insisten que tienen que cumplir los otros republicanos con los deseos de los más conservadores, los Tea Party, y sin cumplir, los del Tea Party no proveen los votos necesarios para avanzar. Así que desafortunadamente este pleito político entre los republicanos puede cerrar las puertas del gobierno porque ellos no pueden decidir qué es lo que quieren hacer. Other questions?
Can I just come back?
Yeah.
Just to, your question was a bit open-ended. So if you're saying the Republicans will come back with a bill that takes out the language on the Affordable Care Act but adds something else, is what you said.
No. If they were to bring up a CR, leave off any provisions that have to do with the defunding or anything.
Right.
I mean, you've seen the list of different provisions that they've thought about adding to
Add
it.
other things.
Well, but again, but without specifying exactly what they would add to it, I think there were other attempts to amend other aspects of the Affordable Care Act that they're floating individually. What we have said all along, we're about amending and fixing. I don't think we should use this process as a legislative fix for the issues they're concerned about. We have other ways of doing that through the regular order, bringing a bill up and debating on the floor, and building consensus amongst Democrats and Republicans. That's not happening right now. There is no consensus building going on. It's either they get their way or they shut down government, and that's not how it's supposed to work. So it's up to them in the House of Representatives. We'd like to be in the majority. We hope to be back there someday. But right now, the ball is in their court. The deadline is coming, 3 days away. The ball is in their court to move something here to keep this government open. That is not continuing to promote their ideological agenda. The most specific is to undo to repeal the Affordable Care Act. That is not going to happen. The Affordable Care Act is not 43 times, 44 times, 45 times, and on. It is not going to be repealed. Not this way, and quite frankly, I don't think it'll ever be repealed. If they had a president and the ability to have majorities in both houses, I will tell you right now, this bill will not be repealed. The American people won't stand for it.
Chairman, so you said last week that you would not support a sequester-level CR even if it was clean. Is that still your position?
Well, I'll support support a clean budget bill. What I won't support is my colleagues on the Republican side trying to inject their social agenda into a budget bill when we're on the brink of shutting the doors to our government when services are essential. And so, well, and we're waiting to see our colleagues to provide us with a clean vote on a clean budget bill so we can keep the doors of government open. And we have yet to see that. I think our Republican colleagues have made it very clear that it is their intention to put in their social agenda regardless of what the American people are saying. And so what we're seeing is a fight among Republicans. They can't decide among themselves what they want to do. And while they're out there brawling, the American people are watching, and pretty soon we're going to be impacted in major ways if they let our government close its doors unnecessarily. And so we wish they would stop their fighting, internal fighting, and decide what they want to do. And hopefully what they decide to do is to give the American people a chance to let their representatives vote up or down on a clean bill to fund the government so we can provide the services that Americans paid for with their taxpayer dollars.
What is now been passed by the Senate only gets the country to November. Have to go back and do this all over again. Do you have any idea that a budget conference can happen in the interim, or appropriation bills can pass in the interim, or any sign that at the end of that, what I believe is maybe 45 days, there would be anything different than what is happening right now?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. We can only hope. Unfortunately, hope hasn't gotten us there over the last 3 or 4 months. As I indicated earlier, we've been trying to go to a negotiation on the budget for months now. The law requires that we complete the conference by April 15th, but as you know, we're well over that. And you obviously can't have a conference if our Republican colleagues refuse to even appoint their negotiators. But it's only a hope that between now and November 15th, our Republican colleagues would be willing to come to the table and truly negotiate. I think I should point out that we have tried 8 times now in the House of Representatives to simply get a vote on our plan that would replace the sequester. The sequester is eating away at important investments around the country. It's eating away at important investments in our infrastructure and transportation. It's eating away at important investments in scientific research. And the Congressional Budget Office just told us yesterday in the hearing before the Budget Committee that if we don't replace that sequester, we will have 800,000 fewer jobs in this country at this time next year. And it could be as high as 1.2 million fewer jobs in this country this time next year. That's another self-inflicted wound, which is why we're going to be working very hard between now and November 15th to eliminate that drag on the economy, which would effectively wipe out the last 3 months of job growth. That's outrageous. I mean, that's a self-inflicted wound that we can't afford in this country. So I can only hope that in the next couple months, our Republican colleagues will do what they've refused to do for the previous 4 months, which is to try and negotiate on these issues. Let me just close. Again, this was a very calculated strategy on the part of Republicans. They didn't negotiate for 4 months in the normal course because they thought that by threatening to shut down the government and threatening that we wouldn't pay our bills, they would somehow force the country and force the president to accept their extreme ideological agenda. They knew they couldn't get it at the negotiating table through the normal course because that requires compromise. And so they're trying to force an uncompromising agenda by threatening to shut down the government and default on our debts. We hope that sanity will finally come to the House Republican Party in the coming months.
Final question.
How much frustration is there in the caucus at having to vote for, even if it comes to that, even a short-term measure that would provide sequester levels that many people oppose?
I'll start, but again, we're 3 days away from watching Republicans shut down the government. And as of this moment, we don't know what the House Republicans will put on the floor of the House for a vote. That's the lunacy of where we've gone, where the greatest democracy in the world is being governed here in Congress by folks who haven't yet decided what they want to do to fund the government in an annual budget bill with less than 3 days to go before the government shuts down. So what do Democrats want to do? Democrats want to stop the game playing. Democrats would like to have a clean bill. Democrats are ready to make tough choices and hard decisions on how we continue to reduce the size of the deficit and how we get Americans back to work and how we strengthen the middle class. We're ready to do all those things. But it's tough when right now, Friday afternoon, 3 short days before the government's going to shut down, our Republican colleagues still haven't told us what they're going to do in terms of a budget to make sure that we don't shut the doors to government. It's crazy. 80% of the American people, 75% of Republicans in this country say it is not appropriate to play with the American economy and our government services in this budget fight. And so I think there are some folks here in Congress who aren't listening to their own constituents if 80% of the American people are saying, stop this game playing. Democrats have said from the very beginning, draft a clean bill, you got votes, even if there are some tough choices that we have to make. But not once in this process, and our ranking member, Mr. Van Hollen, can attest to this, not once have the Republicans reached out to Democrats in the House of Representatives. Of the 435 members, 201 Democrats, voting Democrats. Not once have we had our Republican colleagues reach out to Democrats and say, let's put together a budget bill so we can all vote on it. This has been a totally Republican process, and it should surprise no one that Democrats are prepared to go against any Republican bill which tries to inject extraneous matters that have to do with their social agenda into what should be purely a budget bill 3 days before Republicans shut down the government.
I would just add that what frustrates our caucus is the fact that the Republican caucus is not focused on finding solutions. We want to find solutions to the problems we have right now. But throwing out hypotheticals 3 days before the deadline isn't the time to do that. Hypotheticals maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. That's the time for hypotheticals. Now it's crunch time. And what steps will the Republican caucus take now to ensure that our government does not shut down? That's what frustrates, I think, all of you. It frustrates the American people. It certainly frustrates the Democratic caucus because we don't know what their intention, we don't know what their plan is to keep government operating and open right now. It's all hypothetical. In the end, what I do know is there were hundreds of thousands of federal employees. This is real for them. This is not hypothetical. They don't know whether or not they'll be going to work after October 1st and what impact that will have on their families and on their lives. We don't know what impact, although we can suggest it'll be negative, what impact the shutdown of government will have on our economy, the job loss that will not be recovered because of that. These are not inconsequential events. We understand that, and it is incredibly frustrating to us that we're here once again at the 11th hour, as opposed to doing this in an orderly way and in a fashion that, again, does not create man-made brinksmanship. This is all man-made. This is all done by the Republican caucus because they are so bent on their ideology and to repeal the Affordable Care Act, they are blinded by everything else, and they are blinded to the consequences of what they're playing with. And I think the American people are beginning to understand this all too well.
Chris, come on, join in.
Come on.
Well, as I
set you
indicated,
up.
we have been frustrated that we've been denied 8 times a vote on our plan to replace the sequester. Again, the sequester, all of you know, but it's important people understand these are these very deep, immediate meat axe cuts that are having a negative impact on lots of important investments around the country. And overall, the nonpartisan independent Congressional Budget Office tells us will result in up to 1.2 million fewer jobs next year, and their best estimate is 800,000 fewer American jobs this time next year. So are we frustrated that we've not had an opportunity to even have a vote on our plan to save 800,000 jobs? Absolutely. And we're going to keep fighting for an opportunity to replace that sequester, because it's not good for the country. And we can achieve the same amount of deficit reduction, in fact, even more deficit reduction, without the job loss under the plan that we've proposed as a Democratic caucus here in the House. And in the People's House, we think that the American people deserve a vote on that. If the Speaker wants to vote no, if he wants to vote to have 800,000 fewer jobs in this country at this time next year, that's his prerogative. But we think in the People's House, the American people are entitled to have a vote on the proposal we put forward.
We'll just close by saying that we're hoping that you'll hear some news, that we'll hear some news soon, that our Republican colleagues have decided to drop this obsession with their party platform and jamming that into a budget bill 3 days before they move to close the government. And we are ready to move forward with them on a clean vote on a budget bill. We have been for quite some time. But we also, as Mr. Van Hollen just said, it would be very helpful if they would show that they want to extend a hand to 201 representatives of the American people, because it's time that the American people saw us doing some stuff together. And if 80% of the American public is saying, stop jamming the process on the budget to get your social agenda, we agree with them, and we're ready to work with our Republican colleagues, because there is a middle ground. There is common ground out there, but we should start looking for it before we shut the doors of government. So we want to thank you all for being here, and we'll be in touch.